Chloe was heading back to campus after a weekend at her mother's house. She and her boyfriend, Liam, both lived in the dorms at school. She was supposed to be studying for midterms, but the comfort of home had made it hard to leave. Now, she was weaving through the Friday night crowds of her hometown, her heart a mix of nerves and anticipation. She wanted to get back to campus, to Liam, to her routine. Every detail was mapped out in her mind: the bus ride, the quiet taxi from the station, the way she'd use her student ID to get back into the dorm. She could already picture the look of relief on Liam's face when she walked in. She was pressed to get back to campus, a magnetic pull she couldn't ignore. The 45-minute trip from her mother's house to the downtown bus station felt like an eternity. It was a cool autumn night, the kind where your breath fogs in the air and the city seems to hum with a low electric energy. The clock on a bank tower read 8:32 p.m. as she turned the final corner. Ahead, the familiar blue and red glow of the Greyhound sign cut through the darkness. This station wasn't just a transit hub for her, it was a landmark of her life, a gateway back to school. She knew its layout by heart, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant, a strangely comforting perfume. She'd traveled back and forth from college on that line countless times. This station had witnessed tearful goodbyes and joyous reunions, the nervous excitement of a freshman heading off to a new life, and the weary relief of a student returning home for break. It was a place of beginnings and endings, a constant in the ever-shifting landscape of her late teens and early 20s. It felt safe. It felt like an extension of home. Tonight she walked through its automatic doors with a familiar sense of purpose, her mind already back at campus, ready to see Liam and get back to her studies. She bypassed the nearly empty rows of plastic chairs and went straight to the large, flickering departure board. Her eyes scanned the list of destinations, searching for the 8:30 to Albany. And then she saw it. Next to the familiar listing, a single brutal word glowed in digital red: departed. Her stomach dropped. No, she checked her phone. 8:34. 4 minutes. She was 4 minutes too late. A wave of cold dread washed over her, pushing aside the warm anticipation that had carried her all evening. As if on cue, through the station's large glass windows, she saw the hulking shape of the bus pulling out of its bay. Its red taillights bled into the night, shrinking until they were just 2 tiny pinpricks, and then they were gone. The last bus. She had just missed the last bus. The entire carefully constructed fantasy of her perfect surprise visit shattered in an instant. Frustrated, she stood there, the hum of the vending machine suddenly deafening in the quiet terminal. All that planning, all for nothing. She felt a surge of anger, mostly at herself. She'd even stopped at a gas station restroom on the way, changing out of the comfortable sweatpants and t-shirt she'd left the house in. She'd swapped them for a new pair of fitted jeans and a cute top she'd bought specifically for the occasion, wanting to look good when she finally saw Liam. Now she just felt foolish, standing in her carefully chosen outfit in the middle of a nearly deserted bus station with nowhere to go. Her grand romantic gesture had curdled into a lonely, frustrating dead end. Clinging to a sliver of hope, she walked toward the ticket counter. Maybe there was another bus, a different line, anything. Behind the counter was a familiar face. A man in his late 40s, maybe early 50s, with a neatly pressed Greyhound uniform and a face that seemed permanently set in a pleasant, helpful expression. She'd seen him here for years, a fixture of the station. He'd sold her tickets, wished her safe travels, and always had a kind word. He was Mark. He was part of the reason this place felt safe. He looked up from his computer as she approached, a flicker of recognition in his eyes.
Oh, honey, you just missed it. By a few minutes. Let me check for you, but I'm pretty sure that was the last one to Albany tonight. Yeah, he sighed, turning the screen slightly toward her. Next one's not till 6:15 in the morning. I'm sorry. He saw the despair on her face. Tough break. You look like you were in a hurry to get somewhere special. He paused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Then his expression brightened, as if struck by a brilliant idea. You know what? Don't worry, I got you. I'll give you a ride.
Chloe froze. The offer hung in the air, both a lifeline and a blaring alarm. Every warning she'd ever heard from her parents, from TV shows, from her own common sense, screamed in her head. But was he a stranger? He was Mark. Mark from the Greyhound station. She'd seen him a dozen times. He worked here. He had a name tag. He seemed so normal, so kind. She hesitated, a war raging within her. The rational part of her brain was flashing red alerts, but the desperate, disappointed part saw a solution. A way to salvage her night. As if on cue, her phone buzzed. A text from Liam. "Everything okay?" The simple question amplified her panic 100-fold. She was in a rush, desperate to make it back. The thought of sitting in this cold, empty station for the next 9 hours, her perfect surprise ruined, was unbearable. Mark seemed to sense her conflict.
Look, I'm getting off my shift now anyway. I live out past Albany. It's really not out of my way at all. It's no trouble, I promise. Better than you waiting here all night.
It was the final push she needed. His reasoning was sound. His offer seemed genuine. The alternative was just too bleak. Against her better judgment, against the frantic screaming of her own intuition, she heard herself say, "Okay, thank you so much." She agreed. He beamed, grabbing his jacket from behind the counter. "Great, let's go." He led her through a side door she'd never used before, out into the employee parking lot. The air was colder out here. The relative safety of the brightly lit terminal faded behind them, replaced by long, distorted shadows cast by a single flickering floodlight. His car was not what she would have expected. It was an old, dark-colored sedan, a far cry from the clean, professional image he projected. A small, fresh pang of doubt hit her, but she pushed it down. She'd already agreed. It was too late to back out now. He unlocked the doors with a chirp and held the passenger side open for her. The interior smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and air freshener. As she slid into the seat, the door shut behind her, and the locks engaged with a heavy, final-sounding clunk. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden, enclosed silence of the car. Mark started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, turning not towards the highway, but deeper into the city's side streets. He smiled at her, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. Once in the car, he told her he had to make a quick stop first. He had to stop by his mom's place to drop off some money. The hum of the engine was a low, constant drone, a sound she tried to focus on to drown out the unease coiling in her stomach. She figured it wouldn't take long. A quick ride, a simple drop-off. That was the plan. He'd been charming enough at first, offering a lift when she missed her bus, positioning himself as a helpful acquaintance. The initial small talk had been easy, but now a heavy silence filled the car, punctuated only by the rhythmic thump of the tires on the pavement. She stared out the window, watching the familiar city lights begin to thin out, replaced by longer and longer stretches of darkness. Each passing streetlight was a brief flash of illumination, revealing a tense but composed mask she had carefully constructed. She was an expert at this, at appearing calm when her instincts were screaming. She was still pressed to get back to campus, to her boyfriend. The minutes ticked by, stretching into an uncomfortable eternity. The route he was taking felt wrong. It wasn't the direct path she knew. "Just a quick detour," he'd mumbled a few minutes ago, his voice losing its earlier warmth. Now, as the car slowed to a stop, her heart sank. They had pulled up in front of a grim, isolated apartment building that seemed to sag under the weight of its own neglect. It stood alone on a poorly lit street, a concrete monolith with only 1 or 2 windows faintly illuminated, like tired, jaundiced eyes. The air outside seemed to thicken, the darkness more profound here. It was a nearly vacant apartment building, a place that felt forgotten by the rest of the city, a place where sounds wouldn't carry. A cold dread, sharp and specific, began to replace her vague unease. Every alarm bell in her head was now clanging in a deafening chorus. She tried to convince herself this could still be his mom's place, but something about it felt deeply wrong. This was not a detour. This was a destination. He killed the engine, plunging them into an even deeper silence. The sudden absence of the engine's hum was jarring. He turned to her, his face a landscape of shadows in the faint ambient light. The charming smile was gone, replaced by a neutral, almost bored expression that was somehow more terrifying. "I just need to run in and drop off some money for my mom," he said, the lie hanging thick and obvious in the air. Then came the question, delivered with a casualness that felt rehearsed and predatory. "You want to wait in the car or come inside?" Her mind raced, a frantic calculation of risk. Wait in the car! The click of the central locking system a moment ago had answered that. She was already locked in. Waiting here made her a captive in a metal box, isolated, her fate entirely in his hands. He could leave her here or worse. No, that wasn't an option. Going inside felt like walking into a trap, but it was a trap she could see. It was a trap she could navigate. She thought going in would serve as a constant physical reminder that she had somewhere important to be, that she couldn't waste time. Her presence, standing impatiently in the doorway, would apply pressure. It would communicate urgency. It would make it harder for him to delay, harder for him to change the script. It was a gamble, a choice between two terrible options, but it was the only one that gave her a sliver of agency. "I'll come in," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm already really late." She needed him to remember she was expected elsewhere. She needed him to believe that her absence would be noticed, and soon. The moment the heavy lobby door clicked shut behind them, the outside world vanished. The air inside was stale and cold, carrying the scent of old dust and something vaguely sour, like decay. The hallway was a narrow, oppressive tunnel, lit by a single flickering fluorescent bulb that cast long dancing shadows. Their footsteps echoed unnervingly on the linoleum floor. He led her up a flight of concrete stairs, the silence between them growing more menacing with each step. When she stepped inside the apartment he unlocked, something felt profoundly wrong. It wasn't just the emptiness. It was a feeling of violation, a sense that this space was not meant for living. The apartment was empty, not just tidy but unnervingly bare. There was no furniture, no photos, no sign of life or personality, just 4 bare walls and a dirty window looking out onto a brick wall. In the corner of the main room lay a single stained mattress on the floor. The air was heavy, stagnant, and thick with unspoken threat. This wasn't a home. It was a stage, and she had just walked onto it, realizing too late that she was the only other actor, and she hadn't been given a script. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound of the deadbolt sliding into place echoing like a gunshot in the silent room. "So," he said, his voice dropping to a low, intimate register that made her skin crawl. The pretense was over. He took a step towards her, and in that single movement the entire dynamic shifted. The air crackled with menace. Suddenly he crossed a line. He lunged, not with anger, but with a chilling sense of entitlement, trying to push himself on her, his hands grabbing for her arms, his weight intended to pin her against the wall. But the fear that had been building inside her didn't paralyze her. It detonated. A white-hot surge of adrenaline and rage erupted through her veins. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She fought. She fought back hard, with the desperate, primal strength of a cornered animal. She twisted, kicked, and slammed the heel of her hand into his nose. The shock of the blow, the sudden pain made him recoil for just a second. It was the only opening she needed. By sheer explosive willpower, she broke free from his grasp. Heart racing, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs, she didn't hesitate. She scrambled for the door, her fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. For a terrifying second, it wouldn't turn. Then it gave way. She wrenched the door open and bolted out of the apartment, down the suffocating hallway, and into the night, the sound of her own ragged breaths filling her ears. She reached the car, her lungs burning, her body trembling with leftover adrenaline. She turned back, expecting him to be chasing her. But he wasn't. He was standing in the doorway of the building, bathed in the sickly yellow light of the lobby. There was no anger on his face, no panic, just a flat, chilling emptiness. When she got outside, he didn't yell, he didn't pursue. He just looked at her with utter detachment and coldly told her, "Take your stuff out my car." The words hit her like a physical blow. Numbly, she opened the car door, grabbed her purse and jacket, clutching them tightly as she ran away from the car. He watched her, silent and still, before getting back in his car. The engine started, the headlights cut through the darkness, and he pulled away without a backward glance. The red taillights dwindled into the distance, leaving her utterly alone. Just like that, she was stranded. The silence he left behind was immense, a vast, crushing void in the middle of an unfamiliar, hostile landscape. For a moment she stood frozen, the cold night air seeping into her bones. The full weight of her situation crashed down on her. She was alone, in a desolate part of town with no car and no idea where she was. Shaken, her body still humming with the violent energy of the fight, she tried to think fast. Panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. Survival was the only priority. She pulled out her phone. The battery was critically low, and she knew she had to save it for an emergency. The feeling of being completely cut off was a new wave of terror. But then, her eyes scanned the darkness, desperately searching. and that's when she saw it. Far down the street, a faint, warm glow cut through the darkness, just a hint of light in the distance. As she walked closer, the source slowly came into view. In the vast, threatening darkness, it became a beacon. It meant light. It meant people. It meant cameras and phones and a connection back to the sane world. It meant safety. She took a deep breath and kept moving forward. Only as she approached did she realize it was a 24-hour McDonald's, moving away from the darkness and toward the light. The golden arches, usually a beacon of cheap comfort, felt like a genuine relief. The light they cast was warm and welcoming, a small oasis in the empty street. She had been walking for what felt like hours, the initial adrenaline from her ordeal having long since worn off, replaced by a bone-deep chill and the gnawing ache of hunger. She could smell the hot oil and salt from the fryers inside, a scent that made her stomach clench with a painful mix of desire and hope. She had no money. She had nowhere to go. All she had was the weight of her own bad decisions pressing down on her. She was just about to turn, to force her legs to keep moving toward a destination she couldn't even name, when a sound cut through the late-night hum of the city. It was a woman's voice, hesitant but clear. "Chloe? Is that you?" For a terrifying second, she thought it might be someone she knew, someone who would see her like this, disheveled, lost, a world away from the person she pretended to be. She braced herself for judgment, for pity. But as the woman stepped fully into the light, Chloe's defensive posture faltered. The face was familiar, but not from her current life. It was a face from a different time, a different world, a ghost from a past she hadn't thought about in over a decade. Shock hit her with the force of a physical blow. It was a girl she hadn't seen since they were children. "Sarah?" Chloe whispered, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. Memories, dusty and forgotten, came flooding back in a dizzying rush. They used to spend afternoons together after school, playing in the backyard and sharing secrets. She remembered the thrill of climbing trees and the excitement of birthday parties with too much sugary cake. Their mothers knew each other, bonded by the shared experience of raising daughters in the same quiet suburb. They had been inseparable for a few bright, sunny years, before Sarah's family moved away and the friendship faded into a collection of faded photographs. Looking at her now, the contrast was jarring. Sarah looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. Perfectly styled hair, a fashionable, well-fitted coat, a warm, compassionate expression that only highlighted Chloe's own state of disarray. "Oh my God, Chloe, what are you doing out here?" Sarah's eyes scanned her, taking in the worn-out shoes, the shivering, the dark circles under her eyes. "Are you okay?" Shame washed over Chloe, hot and prickly. She tried to pull herself together to put on a brave face. "I'm fine," she lied, the words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "Just waiting for a ride." But Sarah wasn't buying it. She saw right through the flimsy excuse. "No, you're not," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You don't need to be out here like that. My apartment is just a few blocks away. Please come with me. You can have a hot shower, something to eat. I have a guest room. You can stay the night, no questions asked. My mom would absolutely kill me if she knew I found you like this and just walked away." The mention of her mother, of that old connection, made the offer feel real, solid, safe. For the first time all night, a flicker of genuine hope ignited in Chloe's chest. A warm bed, a locked door, safety. She was about to say yes to let herself collapse into this unexpected kindness when her phone suddenly rang, startling her. As Chloe's phone rang, she was surprised to see Eric's name flash on the screen. She had met Eric just a week ago, during her last visit home. They'd run into each other at a local coffee shop, talked for a while, and exchanged numbers, promising to keep in touch. She hadn't expected to hear from him again so soon, especially now at this moment. Relief flooded her as she answered, her voice a frantic whisper, caught between surprise and desperation. She quickly told him everything, the stress, being stranded with no money, and her urgent need to get somewhere safe. Eric listened calmly, his steady, confident baritone cutting through her panic. "Whoa, slow down, it's okay, I got you," he said. "Don't worry about a thing." He made it sound so simple, so easy. His confidence was a balm on her frayed nerves. He told her, "Okay, here's the plan. Hop in a cab. Meet me at the gas station on the corner of 5th and Main. I'm just around the corner. I'll pay for it when you get there, and then I'll drive you wherever you need to go." It was the perfect solution. A knight in shining armor on the other end of a phone call. She turned back to Sarah, her face flushed with a renewed, albeit fragile, sense of hope. "It's okay," she said, trying to sound convincing. "My friend Eric is coming to get me. He's going to pay for a cab to meet him." Sarah looked skeptical. "Are you sure, Chloe? You can just stay with me. It's no trouble at all." But Chloe was already decided. "I'll be fine," she insisted, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. "I just need to get back." Relieved, she got in the cab that Sarah helped her flag down. As the door shut, sealing her off from the cold street and the concerned face of her childhood friend, she felt a surge of misplaced triumph. She was handling it. She was fixing it. The cab pulled away from the curb, and she watched Sarah shrink in the rearview mirror, a solitary figure under the unforgiving lights of the McDonald's. A pang of regret hit her, but she pushed it down. This was the right choice. It had to be. The ride was short. The city lights blurred past the window in streaks of red and white. But when they pulled up to the designated gas station, the sense of triumph evaporated. The place was an island of fluorescent light in a sea of darkness, and it was completely deserted. He wasn't there. "This is it," the driver said, his voice flat. Chloe scanned the empty parking lot, her heart beginning to pound a frantic rhythm against her ribs. He said he'd be right here," she stammered. She pulled out her phone and called Eric. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. Panic began to set in. The cab driver grew impatient. He let out a heavy sigh, tapping a staccato rhythm on the steering wheel. The meter was still running, each tick of the numbers a fresh wave of anxiety for Chloe. After another minute of tense silence, the driver turned around, his face a mask of annoyance. "Look, lady, where's this guy? My time is money." His voice was sharp, accusatory. "He'll be here," she pleaded, her voice thin and reedy. "He promised, just another minute." The driver scoffed, turning back around. "One more minute. Then you either pay me or I call the cops. Your choice." The threat hung in the air, thick and suffocating. She was trapped. Just as things were about to escalate, just as the driver was reaching for his radio, a figure stumbled into the light at the edge of the parking lot. It was Eric. But it wasn't the calm, confident hero from the phone. This version of Eric was a wreck. He was staggering, his clothes were rumpled, and he was squinting against the light as if it pained him. He was drunk. Not just tipsy, but profoundly, undeniably drunk. He stumbled toward the taxi, waving a handful of cash. He fumbled with the driver's side door, leaning heavily against the car. "How much?" he slurred, his words thick and indistinct. The driver named the price, and Eric peeled off several bills from a thick wad and shoved them through the window. He paid the driver, even tipped him extra. "Keep the change," he mumbled. The driver's anger vanished, replaced by a flicker of greed. He snatched the money, grunted a thanks, and without another word to Chloe, he hit the gas. The taxi's red taillights disappeared into the night, leaving her in a sudden, ringing silence. Now she was stuck again. The relief she had felt was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy dread. This man, her supposed rescuer, was clearly too intoxicated to drive. He could barely stand upright. The plan, the perfect solution, had dissolved into a far more dangerous problem. He swayed on his feet, trying to focus on her. "Hey," he said, a goofy, unnerving grin spreading across his face. "So, car's not here. My buddy. He had to take it." He gestured vaguely into the darkness. It was a pathetic, obvious lie. He then looked around, his bleary eyes landing on the flickering neon sign of a seedy-looking motel adjacent to the gas station. He pointed a wobbly finger at it. "It's okay," he slurred, his voice taking on a conspiratorial tone. We'll get a room for the night." Fear, cold and absolute, gripped her. The words "get a room" echoed in the terrifying silence. She had just escaped one volatile situation, turned down a genuine offer of safety, and gambled on a stranger, only to find herself in another scenario that felt infinitely more dangerous. She was alone, in the middle of the night, with a man she didn't know, who was drunk and unpredictable. No one knew where she was. The hope she had clung to all night had finally completely been extinguished, replaced by the chilling certainty that she had made a terrible, terrible mistake. In the motel room, she stayed awake all night, sitting on the edge of the seat, never letting her guard down. He eventually passed out. At dawn, he drove her back to her dorm. She was safe, but the lesson was seared into her memory. A familiar face ain't always familiar. And sometimes jumping from one bad situation to another only puts you deeper in the fire. When Chloe finally returned to campus, she found Liam waiting for her in the dorm lobby, worry etched across his face. She collapsed into his arms, the weight of the night finally lifting. There were no words, just relief, comfort, and the silent promise that she was safe, and she was home.